active member? The kind that would be missed? Or are you just content that your name is on the list? Do you attend the meetings and mingle with the flock? Or do you just stay at home and criticize and knock? Do you take an active part to help the club along? Or are you satisfied to just belong? To push the cause along and make things really thick? Or leave the work to just a few and talk about the clique? Think this over, brother. You know right from wrong. Are you an active member? Or do you just belong?
Thank you for joining us. My name is Jason Logan, former Hells Angel, and welcome to Patched. We will bring you into the complex workings of the motorcycle club culture and the challenges members face as they exit into life outside the club. My co-host, Justin Mooch DeLoretto, former Mongol, and I will introduce you to real-life former members as they tell their personal experiences inside the club and the aftermath in each episode. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Patch Podcast. My name is Jason, former member of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. This is my co-host.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Justin, but everybody calls me Mooch. I'm a former member of the Mongols Motorcycle Club, and these days I'm a social worker and mental health therapist. A common thread we've seen over the years from being in this motorcycle world is that a lot of its members share a lot of things in common, whether it's balancing the family and club life, whether it's the emotional effects of the club, or what brought us into this life, or what it's like after. So we're going to try and dive deeper into that and see how that goes. And what do you think about that, Jason?
I think that's great. You and I both know that there's a strong need for this. We've seen many brothers over the years in and out of the motorcycle clubs, and once they leave, we all know how difficult it is for guys to get back into into society. Justin and I got together. I read his book. We talked on the phone numerous times, and every time we talked, we said that there was a strong need for this and how we can help out our brothers, help out the culture, help out anyone who's on two wheels that's having emotional difficulties with life and what's going on. We want to be that place where people can come and talk and reach out to us for some advice, because we'll let you know right now, we both go through struggles. We both have everyday lives. We both are balancing many things at once. We get it, and we understand, and we're here to help.
I completely agree, and I think one thing that something out there attracted every one of us to motorcycle clubs. There's a reason that we join this lifestyle and do what we do.
If you're wondering why the two of us are here today or actually on screen together, it's because we see a bigger purpose. We see a greater need for what's going on in the world right now, what's going on in our biker culture, the people that we interact with, that we have dealt with in the past, the people that we know these days. We're creating an outreach program to try to help some of the brothers that we truly care about. And this includes everyone that has a passion for two wheels.
So what kind of got you involved in motorcycles in the first place, and then thinking about joining a club?
Motorcycles in the first place. I didn't grow up having dirt bikes. My parents couldn't afford to say, let's go out and get you guys dirt bikes. But as I got older, and I always had a fascination for the motorcycle lifestyle and truly riding, I obviously set it in my mind that I was going to get a bike and then I was going to join a club. And in my area where I grew up, there was only one club to join. And like most people in North America, where you are is where the club that's dominant is the club you kind of go to, per se. And maybe you know somebody and maybe you don't. Like me, I didn't really know anybody, so I had to do the whole introduction on my own. But what I loved about the club and what I still love about it is that it gives you a chance to go on a ride. I mean, every weekend you could be somewhere. It's organized to an extent. I mean, there's people to ride with. There's an image to uphold when you're on that bike, when you're wearing that patch. There's a sense of responsibility that I always took upon myself with the public, with the members in the club, with the members in other clubs. That I felt was a great weight to be holding. And with that great weight comes a lot of emotional and, it can be seen as baggage, but it can also just be seen as it's a great opportunity, right? It's a great opportunity to learn from. Wouldn't you agree, Mooch?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in that kind of punk rock and skinhead scene, and the older guys in my era were all riding Vespa scooters. And so, when as a teenager, I thought, oh, that was it. That's what I wanted to do. I was going to be on this little 150cc two-stroke scooter and ripping around town. But, it didn't take long before I graduated up to an actual motorcycle. I have an identical twin brother, and he bought a Sportster and then a Softail Springer, and I ended up getting a Night Train in 2004. And, we just started riding together, and it was one of those things where, we started learning to ride side by side with each other. And coming from, kind of street life and gang life, I was always attracted to groups. I always wanted to be a part of something, or I'd already been a part of something. And so motorcycle clubs really called out to me for that sense of belonging and that brotherhood. And so once I started riding, I really, was like, this is something I want to do. And so, like you said, a lot of times you join the club that's in your area, and I think one of the themes that we're going to be talking about a lot over the next couple episodes is that, a lot of us have a lot in common, and the only thing that separates us is the patch that we wear. And generally, that patch is because of the region that we grew up in, or we knew someone in that club already. And so there's where you grow up in certain areas is kind of what club you join. And so in my area, Oregon was a lot older school. There wasn't a lot of the major 1%er clubs, but I ended up being introduced to some Mongols, and I ended up joining the Mongols. So that that's what brought me into that club life and got me going. When you were in club life, what were some of the pros? What were some of the things that you really enjoyed about club life?
The pros were the connections that you had access to, right? So let's just say, locally, you could pretty much ride your bike to most venues at the time. We weren't being told we couldn't go inside places when I first came around the club. So it was a sense of almost being in LA. It was a sense of being part of Hollywood. We would roll down to Sunset, be parking our bikes on the sidewalk. We'd be cruising down Sunset, and everyone's turning their heads. I mean, there's a whole image, there's a history with wearing that patch. And, when you get off that bike and you walk into a bar or a restaurant, everyone's head turns. And that goes for pretty much everyone in every club that's dominant in their area. It's just people know there's history there. So for me, it was just, like I said, it was like when you went to put your boots on, when you went to go put your patch on, when you went to get on that bike and ride off into the night from where you live and get on that freeway, you had this overwhelming sense of, wow, I can't even, sometimes you just couldn't even believe that you were actually sitting on the bike, you had the patch on, that you had the boots on, because people are driving by, people are looking at you and just saying, I have no idea what that guy's life is like. But wow. And I'm sure you felt the same way. A lot of people can agree with me on this. It's just there is an overwhelming sense of it's almost like you grew 2 inches when you put that patch on, and that's a good way for me to basically say it for anyone in any club. When you put that patch on, you get taller. You get bigger, you get taller. Now, it's how you use that and how you interact with the public or even your own club brothers as to how your time in the club's going to be. And from my perspective, and even why Mooch and I are even talking today, is because I looked at it from a different perspective. I knew all the clubs had history, whether it was violence or, arguments or, whatever went down. But I also met a bunch of great guys along the way. And those guys, over the time, also had my back along with my own club brothers. So that was eye-opening to me. And that really opened up my eyes to the network that we truly are on the brink of. And being able to accept people, like we just said, someone in another club has the same problems that you're having. They have a mom who's got cancer. They have a dad who just passed away. They have a kid who might not be well. They have kids that are going to college. They have brothers that have lost their jobs. They have bills. They're getting divorced. I mean, club life is not easy, and every time we turned around, there was another obstacle being thrown at you. When everyone thinks that the club life was a party, I used to tell people that came around the club, it's not a fucking party. This is work. Now, if you're not here to do the work, then you might as well just go. Because if you're here for the party, the party is only once in a blue moon. It's all the work in between and the stuff we need to do to represent this club. And some people would be taken back by that, but eventually the right guy would come around and they'd go through the process and we'd see how it would work out.
Yeah, I definitely think that one of the reasons we partied so hard is because we work so hard, right? So you're living this high stress life. You're constantly putting out fires, especially if you get into leadership. But even as a regular member, there's a lot of expectations on you. There's a lot going on. So that when we do get together and cut loose, the part that people see, the partying that people see, that's because we've been working so hard. There's so much shared experience that's been going on, the stress, the trauma that we've shared. We also end up partying hard together. And I think, one of my favorite things about club life that I liked was, and you touched on a little bit, was just the community aspect. It was constantly meeting new people from different areas, different states, other clubs. So many people that, my life, I never would have met otherwise. Our paths would have crossed. And we were able, because we have this shared experience, or most of us wore the same patch, it kind of already took down that barrier of meeting new people, and it kind of dropped people's guards, and we were able to have real conversations and real connections. And so I think that was super beneficial, or is super beneficial about that lifestyle as well, as you get group of alpha males together, but we're able to kind of share our feelings and talk, and because we're experienced so much together, whether it's time on the road, whether it's any of the wartime stuff, or the positive stuff like the meetings or the parties and the stuff you talked about. That's what it's attractive to everybody, like that's what brings you in. But I also think it's one of the things that you take away from it too, is just the networking and the connection that goes with it. When you joined the club, what did because like you were talking about, everyone has a lot in common, right? Most of us have families and old ladies and all that stuff. So what did your family or old lady think when you joined the club?
When I joined the club, I was married with one child, and I had a second one on the way. So anyone who's listening to this can only imagine what the conversations were like at home when I said, "Oh, by the way, not only am I going to go hang around with, a member from the Hells Angel Motorcycle Club, but my intentions are to become a member. My family, my parents, my brother, my in-laws, my wife, everyone that's connected to us was like, why would Jason put himself in this position? All the things that he has going on. I was in the fire department for almost 10 years, and I left basically to run my own businesses, and this was the same time where I said, I'm going to get a bike and I'm going to join the motorcycle club because that's what I want to do. So yes, for anyone who's listening at home that has had marital issues over the years, yes, saying that you're going to become a member of a top 1% motorcycle club, I can only imagine wasn't an easy conversation. Now,
I bet.
I am lucky. Go ahead, brother.
I always tell new members when they join, if you're a single man, you get into that lifestyle and you meet someone, they kind of already understand that what they're getting into, right? Like as you start dating, they notice that you're gone a lot, or you're out with the guys, or you have these responsibilities, you're on the phone. But if you're already married, you bring with you a certain lifestyle that your family's accustomed to. They're used to you being around the house, getting things done over the weekend, that family time together. And so if you're already married and then you join a club life, that's a major shift, right? Like your whole lifestyle's changing. And I think, that puts a lot of stress on a relationship. And also I've told, the club this as well. It puts a lot of stress on the prospect or the member because, a lot of times they're in this position where they're choosing their family or their club. Well, you have to put one over the other in different circumstances. And if it's, they're choosing the club, they're going to be on the phone with their old lady, or going to be upset, they're fighting, or they can't be focused because things aren't good at home. So there's a lot of back and forth there. And it really depends on, what your relationship was before you joined. So what were your takeaways from balancing that like family and club life balance?
Well, you definitely become an expert in time management. I'll tell you that because, when you head out on a run on a Friday morning and you got to be home by Sunday afternoon to either do something with the family or get yourself together for Monday because of work, family, kids, it puts that 48 hours of I'm going to be free on my bike for, one trip to it crunches it down quick, you know. Like we said, the single guy who can say I'm going to take day off on Friday and then he doesn't need to be back until Sunday night at midnight to crash and then get up for work on Monday. That's a different mentality for guys like us who have families, who have wives, who have kids. Because, you know, on the way home on a Sunday from a run, it can either be leisurely, you can go hit a few bars on the way home and chill, or you need to get home as soon as possible because there's something going on that you need to help with. And so I was in that boat of get away on Friday and then be back as quick as possible on Sunday. And some nights I would go all the way up to the Bay Area and I'd head back in the same night just because I needed to be back for a kid's sporting event. So a lot of people couldn't understand that as well. Like guys in the club couldn't understand, like, how can you have a job, you know, be involved in a charity, have kids, and still make it to all these runs? And I did it solely on the fact that that's what I thought was expected of us. That's what we signed up for. I never looked for an excuse not to go on a run. I always wanted to go on a run. I loved it. I thought riding was, especially long distance, was like, I look forward to that every year. That it didn't matter if it was a funeral, if it was a party. I'm trying to figure a way to get there on my bike. And when you start doing that a lot and you start showing up to places a lot, you get a lot more, I guess you could say, kudos from the other members. And I'm sure, Mooch, you can testify to this, that when you show up a lot, people in the club say, well, that brother's fucking putting the time in, you know? And those are the kind of guys that I gravitated towards in the club. So to take away from that is that I had a lot of strong relationships because of the time I put into the club. I got those strong relationships out, and I value those.
That's something that's learned in the club life too, is that nothing's handed to you, right? You've got to work for everything, and it starts with hanging around or prospecting or whatever you had to do to join the club, but it goes throughout the club and as a member. And those guys that want a reputation or wanted to make a name for themselves, you had to put in the work. And you know, in the early days in Oregon, majority of the Mongols at the time were in Southern California. So for us to make a name for ourselves and get to know people, we were constantly on our bikes. And it started to be that reputation of, man, Oregon's at everything. Oregon's everywhere. But we had to put in that work, you know, and a lot of the generations that came later, you know, don't understand the work that went in initially. But anytime we started a new chapter, you were on your bikes, you were riding, you were going to the events. And the other part too is if you're hosting an event, you're wanting people to make sure that people from out of state are coming to it too, right? And so if you're going to theirs, they generally send people to yours. So there's a lot that goes into it, and you're often on the road, or you're often riding, you know, because especially as a newer member, because you're, you know, trying to build your name and build your reputation and start to meet more people, and, you know, like you said, make those connections. So you didn't sound like you did a ton of riding. Did you have any like favorite club run?
My favorite club run always is the USA run. You know, it's like you're going to be gone for 7 or 8 days. You get to go to a new state, you know. We usually every other year I had a special job in the club where we set up the tattoo room for our members, and that was always fun. Truly some great connections there when you get to talk to a member for one-on-one for the whole time they're getting a tattoo. And I know it sounds like, oh, you know, what are these guys doing getting tattoos and all that stuff, but that to me was like the most special time at any event, was when I would be in the room with someone from the club who was tattooing another member, and listening to those conversations in complete silence almost. The crowd would be silent, just listening to these stories and getting to know these guys truly on a basis more than just giving them a hug at an event and then saying like, hey, how you doing, brother? And then passing on, or, you know, or let's go get a drink, or, you know, how are you guys doing? But those 2 hours with the member, you got to know them. And I cherish those times, and I think that those are invaluable to me, just being part of that. And I'm so grateful that I was not into the party scene in the club. I was more into the work aspect of the club, because that's where I met and found some really true solid relationships. How about yourself, brother?
Yeah, so I would say there was two. You know, for a while we would host the regional run there in Oregon, and even though it was a run we hosted, so a ton of work went into it, so it's tough to say it was something I enjoyed because I was working so hard. But it was great to see how well it went off, and it was also, you know, again, these were the early years, so having members up from California talking about, oh, Oregon does it right, or Oregon knows how to party, and then the next year more guys come, or I'm in LA and they're like, oh yeah, I want to make it to one of those Oregon parties. I always really looked forward to that, the planning that went into it. I grew up touring in a punk rock band. I had that real DIY ethic, and so when I built parties, I did it the same way. I wanted to make sure that there was girls there, or there was music playing. I didn't want to be in that old adage of just a bunch of bikers standing around in a field,
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that there was entertainment and people enjoyed themselves. I wanted it to be that when people left, they bragged about it or talked about it, so that the guys that missed it felt like they missed out,
Yeah.
Because those are those things, those are those reputations that get around, and then you start having the bigger and better events. And then Palm Springs in California was our club's national run. And even though we didn't do a lot of riding, we would ride there. But once we got there, you pretty much put up the bikes, and it was like a 3-day pool party from MTV Spring Break, man. I mean, the prospects were jousting over the pool. There was wet t-shirt contests and girls dancing. There was DJs. So that was just good. It was one time to kind of just cut loose and have fun. The only people that were allowed in there were, members and guests. And so you could really just cut loose and have a good time. So I always looked forward to that every year. I didn't really even drink or do anything until I was about 35, so I stayed away from that party scene for a while too. But then when I did get into it, I will say in that defense is that those late nights in those hotel rooms, I built some very deep connections. There was brothers, like you said, you go to these events and you shake hands and how are you doing, and a lot of it's in passing or political talks. But actually just sitting down and hearing the stories, whether it's in the tattoo shop or that late night in the hotel room, but hearing the stories from the older generation, hearing what brought people into the club, those are the things that always made my relationship so much tighter and always really made me enjoy those events.
Yeah, and something to add to that is for me, it's keeping in contact once you've made that special relationship, right, with a brother. It's checking in on them. That was a big habit that I was always in with the club. Is okay, if I talked to a brother at an event and he was having a down day or something bad was going on in his life, his personal life, despite the club, because we know it's always up and down, but personal life, I would make a note and then I would check in with those brothers later, and I saw a change in some of these brothers because they weren't getting those phone calls from people in the club. And it's not to say that I'm anything special or anything like that. That's just how I saw it, as this is a personal connection. If you know somebody's not doing well, then guess what? I'm going to reach out and check on you more than just at that party. A couple weeks after the party, 3 months after the party, make sure I'm going to see you at the next thing. Are you okay? Are you going to be there? All those things added up to to get that, a genuine hug out of a brother, to get that, hey, we're going to go because Jason's putting a party on, at his clubhouse. We want to be there just to show support. All that stuff made a huge impact on me, and it's something I will take with me forever. And I'm sure, Mooch, you have a ton of the same stories over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of those things, like I was saying before, is that nothing's handed to you in club life. And people, they want to join a club because they say, I'm looking for brotherhood, or I need good friends in my life. But you don't just get the patch and immediately get close friends or close brothers, right? That you got to put in that effort. You got to build those connections. And I think, like you said, that comes from that follow-up, that staying in touch. Yeah, we may only see each other a couple of times a year at national runs, but we're talking, we're sharing memes, we're laughing, we're there for each other in times of need. I think that's what builds the real brotherhood. And then, of course, there's those times of danger or trauma, or stuff where we've experienced something together that you generally wouldn't experience with other people, and that builds that brotherhood. But I don't think that's something that just is inherent or just comes with the patch. It's something that you've got to work for and earn. And I think a lot of people that aren't from this lifestyle don't understand that. Because I have people hit me up, I want to join a club because I want brothers. And I always often say, hey, if you haven't had friends, at least 1 or 2 lifelong friends your whole life, you're probably not going to fit in this world either. You don't just get a patch and hey, here's friends. Now, yeah, cool, you got people with you now, right? So you've got to put in that work, be there for each other, and be able to reach out for each other. And I think with that lifestyle, there comes a lot of stress, right? every time you put on that patch, you're risking death or jail for a million different reasons. But whether it be from a rival club, whether it be from riding your motorcycle, being in a pack, right, especially in California freeways, there's the stress that comes with that. There's the stress that comes with the club politics, COC politics, stuff with other clubs, and then even coming down to the argument with the family, finding that balance, putting so much time into the club that you're missing work, etc. So, I think there's a ton of stress that comes with club life, and I don't necessarily know if everyone knows how to deal with that, and I think that's one of the things that we're going to kind of touch on too. But what was your kind of go-to to coping with stress?
Well, always the go-to is exercise. Make sure that you've gotten yourself squared away, as best you can, right? So exercise helps build confidence, and with a little more confidence helps, you deal with a few little things, the bumps in the road. But as far as stress, like I said, we can take that mental break for a little bit to get on that bike and roll down the highway, but the stress will be there when we get off the bike, right? That's just natural. So there's a few ways to deal with stress. Like I used to make tons of lists and just start scratching stuff off as you get it accomplished, because that'll help your mind deplete the fact that you have so much stuff going on. If you can start saying, hey, there's 5 things that are like really pertinent, but if I start knocking them out, then you have a sense of relief, and that's important. Also, like I said, bouncing something off of someone that you trust. We all have somebody in the club, whether it's in your charter or whether it's in another charter, that you truly can say almost anything to, and they can relate with you. And I think that having that is really important. And I still reach out to guys who, when I find out that they've left the club, I'm probably one of the first people. If I was close with you back then, I'm the first person to say, hey, I'm here. I know we couldn't talk for the last however many years, but now that you're out of the club, if you need anything, I'm available. And I've had some guys that are like, hey, everything's cool. And I've had some guys that are like, oh no, man, I'd love to reconnect, because they're almost, in a state of like they're lost, you know what I mean? And it can be tough. And not everyone has that well-balanced life like we talked about, like a wife, kids, and stuff that you have going on at home that can supersede all the stuff that we were involved in the club. You were very busy in the club, Mooch, and I was very busy in the club. And to go from being at 2 different charter meetings a week and being on the COC and then COC calls every week on conferences, and to go to those meetings every month and to travel to different places, and then all of a sudden for that to stop, it's like, what do you fill all that with? And everyone does something different. And I think a big part of what Mooch and I are really trying to reach out to people is to say, contact Mooch and I and ask, is there a way to figure that out? Because not everyone's got a well-balanced life. They have their association with the club is priority. And if that goes away for whatever reason, whether you leave on your own terms or you're asked to leave from the club, it's still going to be difficult. Even if you choose to leave, it can be daunting sometimes. I can't tell you how many times, Mooch, and I'm sure you're in the same boat, that I have dreams about the club, and I wake up and, I feel like I have unfinished things that I needed to do, or people I needed to help, and that's hard, and it can be emotionally stressful on you, and you can't talk to anybody about this stuff. I mean, who can I talk to in my family about this? They have no idea. They didn't like the fact that I joined the club. They didn't like the fact that I was in the club. When I got out, they were all joyed, but I'm still the one dealing with it, And it's like, who can you really go to and say, this is what we were dealing with? Like you said, like, death or jail. And it's like, that was every week you put that in the back of your mind, but you tried to keep it as far out of your perspective as possible so you could actually enjoy being on that bike and wearing that patch. But believe me, every time you took your guard down, it came back with a vengeance. So, dealing with that for almost a decade, it's plays a toll on you, And I think this is one of the main reasons why when Mooch and I first started talking on the phone and texting back and forth, and we were just like, there are so many people we know out there that have been involved in this over the years, that have dealt with this and have no way of getting any outreach. And they don't know who to talk to. They don't trust anybody. I mean, I'm not going to go to a therapist and start rapping on about the club life, so what do they know about it? I don't know. Do you feel the same way, Mooch, with what I'm talking about right here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things that I think is cool, and we've discussed before, and I think I'm hoping that this is something that our audience picks up on is, we both came from similar lifestyle from different clubs. And, when I first started talking to you or talking to members of other members, ex-members from your club, there's that mindset of those people are like, oh, how could you talk to the enemy, right? Or guys on the other side. And the realization I really had is anyone that's been in a 1%er club or, a top tier club for a long time like we were, put in as much work as we did in that club, lived it day to day, and then left that club and had to, kind of get their life back on track or refocus their life. I have more in common with that guy than I have with anybody else, regardless of the patch, because we have that shared experience that I keep talking about. But we went through something similar, and it's something that not a lot of other people have gone through outside of our world. And so we could really understand each other and understand where we're coming from and hopefully be able to help other people in that same position. I know for me, like you said, you're having several meetings a week, you're active every weekend, you're always gone. And for me, I really had to replicate that busyness or that pace, but with more positive stuff. Instead of going to chapter meetings, I was going to the gym or I was going to jiu-jitsu. And instead of traveling for club stuff, I was traveling for jiu-jitsu tournaments. Or, I was finding other things to stay as busy as I was before, but to me, more positive things in my life. And that didn't come with those death or jail risks. And that way, also I'm doing it with a shared group of people. So I still felt like I had that brotherhood. But kind of replicating or even replacing things from our past, but doing it in a similar manner. I think that helped me a lot, kind of get through everything and bring me back to where I was. So, we were talking about all the stress, all the rides, the good stuff of it, but when did you kind of decide it was time to leave?
Well, that's an interesting story, but I mean, because we've talked and you've talked with one of our associates, kind of what I was working on in the club, what my hopes were to do with what I was working on in the club, and what I kind of realized was that this was right around the Bandidos trial when all this transpired, and my thoughts were at the time that it wasn't ever going to get any better, and it was going to be impossible for me to convince an entire club to understand what we're talking about here, that everyone on the other team has the similar traits and backgrounds and struggles and realities. It's just too hard to get everyone to see it that way. We're all very passionate in our own way. And when something happens between our clubs or between another 1%er club, you get a large majority of the people rolling down the path of, well, hey, hoorah, let's go out and get them, And so talking on the defensive side, like how I was, trying to keep everyone from getting wrapped up and going to prison all at once, because this is what I had witnessed with what went down with the shooting in Waco with the Bandidos and how they loaded everyone up into buses and then sent them away for 3 to 4 weeks before they were able to get their phones or talk to their families. And I remember going to the East Coast to speak to an officers meeting, and I explained it that way. And like before I got into the meeting, everyone was looking at me like, wait a minute, what's he here to talk about? Like, we don't want anything to do with that shit. Like, are you out of your fucking mind? We don't want to fucking talk to another motorcycle club. We don't want to figure it out. This shit's never going to work. And all I said was, got up and spoke and said, can anyone afford to be away from work and their family with no way to communicate with them for 4 weeks? Who can afford to pay your bills after that? And the room went quiet. Because that's the reality of it. It's like we can be gung-ho, hoorah, hey, go fuck those guys, hey, fuck the cops, all that shit. But guess what? And the reality of it is, at the end of the weekend, whoever's in jail and whoever's not, we all got to pay for it all. And who can afford to keep that going? Because I saw what Laughlin did to our club. I saw what happened in Hot August Nights in Reno did to our club between the Green and us. I mean, it's just every single big incident put our club back years, financially, membership-wise. I mean, you guys were in the same boat, and during Black Rain. I mean, all this stuff that we don't want to look at, the history of what happens after these events with the clubs. The membership goes down, the people lose interest, it's harder to get people back out there. That's a constant deterrent, and it's just it was evident, super evident, that it was never gonna get to a better place. As much as I would love for it to, and I think about it still, like there's truly a network that we're missing out on across North America, but it's just very difficult to get everyone on the same page, and I'm sure you can attest to that, Mooch. And like we said, we've had many conversations about that already. And yes, it's heartbreaking sometimes to think that people are just they're there and there's nothing they can do about it except for to react after something bad's happened.
How did your family take the news that you were leaving the club? Family, friends, people that cared about you.
My wife was crying at work. Probably immediately when I told her. She was, because you can only imagine, almost 10 years of wondering if I'm going to come home on that bike after leaving. Like, hey, he rode off, he got somewhere. But every time I was on that bike on a highway or coming home or anywhere, there's a possibility for him not to come home. Not to mention I was at a few events where people didn't come home. So, that reality was very much a constant, So my wife took it probably, the hardest, I guess you could say, from, emotionally wise, like letting it out. But for the most part, everyone else was just like, okay, well, you've been in it a long time, you've done a lot of stuff, and I guess you're going to move on to do something different, right? We all have these little networks of people in our communities. I mean, you can attest to this, right? Jiu-jitsu, you have a little network. The gym, you have a little network. Your work, you have a little network. And within those networks, we all look to those people like we're Robin Hood. We're somebody who's done something that they can't even fathom. We're the guys who ride out in the middle of the night where they couldn't ride down to the beach on a bike on a Sunday, So we take this role, and so people look at us in a completely different way. And so when you say like, hey, I'm done with that, nobody's going to say like, well, why'd you do that? They're already just trying to understand, why did you do it in the first place?
Right.
So, I mean, that's how I look at that. Like every single conversation I have with somebody new, if it comes up that I ride motorcycles, and then it comes up that I was in a motorcycle club, and then when they ask what motorcycle club I was in, and when the answer comes out of my mouth, the look on their face goes from, okay, forget about anything else you've told me, and let's go focus on this, because this is what I want to know. And even before we started talking about doing this podcast, my good friend Scott, one of our producers, said, because I looked at him and said, what do I have to talk about? Like, who wants to listen to myself or Mooch talk about, like, this stuff? And he said, Jason, I don't know if you realize it or not, but every time you bring up something about being on that bike in that club, I am 100% full attention. Because to me, it's exciting, it's interesting, and there's something there. And I go, okay, well, I don't see it like that. But after a lot of convincing, and here we are. And I think that what we have going on here and the ability to help some brothers out is why we're here. So, Mooch, if you can tell us why you left the club, and then also how your family's reaction was when you left.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. I'd been in the club for 15 years. I'd done a lot of expansion with the club, so starting in new areas. And every time I started a chapter of the Mongols in a new state, there was a lot of stress and tension with that. And the last area I did, that last year I was in the club, a close friend of mine was murdered, and then a close member of the club was murdered, and it was, it was under my watch. It was under my leadership, and I took a lot of that very personal. At the same time, law enforcement had contacted me and told me that this other club had a contract out on my life. So you can imagine that the stress levels were pretty high. I was getting pretty burnt out. At the same time, our national leadership has changed. So before, I'd gotten a lot of support from the club, especially in new areas and stuff like that, and I wasn't getting that support anymore. And so here I was, these other clubs were out to get me essentially, or threatening to, and I didn't even feel that support from my own club. And so I really thought, the club's starting to go in this direction that some people seemed happy with, and I wasn't. And I stood up and said what I could say, and people didn't seem, similar to, sounds like what you were saying, is I stood up to the membership and said what the direction I think we should go, and it didn't seem to really resonate. And I think a lot of the newer members had different morals and values than me, and it no longer made sense to me to put on that patch every day and make those risks if I wasn't getting that same support from my own club. And then, seeing people die that were that close to me due to choices that I made, that we made collectively, it seemed like it was probably time to go. And I think one thing I think is a misconception for people that aren't from this world is people don't realize that you can leave a motorcycle club, right? I don't know if it happened to you, but when I left and told people I was leaving the Mongols, everyone's like, you can do that? And I bet I've seen more people leave the club than I've ever seen join, and I brought in a lot of people. But I think, that was an important point too, is that it wasn't a major thing to leave the club. Obviously there was some fallout and some politics over it. But, it wasn't any hardship. I notified the club. It wasn't for me anymore. I turned over my patches and I moved on about my way and moved on with my life. I think, as far as my family goes and my family's reaction, there was a lot of relief for, like you were saying, because I'm going to be home more and the safety stuff. But, I think there was some concern too, because I spent 15 years of my life as, fully immersed in this world. And I think the takeaway was, is that my identity was never tied to the Mongols. I wasn't who I was because I was a Mongol. And I felt like my identity is tied to who I am as a person. And I'm that same person with or without that patch. And so I think that's kind of what's helped me move forward since then. But initially, I think there was relief in my family, but there was a lot of concern, like, what's he going to do now? Like those parts that we had talked about, And I think that's one of the things that brings us together is we know there's a lot of people that have left club life that have gone through a lot of the same things of us, and they gave up that 1%er community, and they feel like they're alone. And I think our goal is to show them these people aren't alone anymore. There's a big community of us, of guys that grew up in that world that are no longer a part of it, that are still doing positive and big things. And we could all have this community together. And so I think this outreach and getting everyone together and having this discussion, bringing this mental health to the forefront of, hey, we've all been through some traumatic stuff. We've all been through this stress. How can we help each other out? And I think that's one of the big things that I'm really excited about to do with this podcast.
I think that's great, Mooch. And to tell you the truth, like, I'm almost 7 years out of the club, and I still get asked, so are you out? And it's like, and I go, if I was still in, you wouldn't see me probably. So, yes. But yes, you do get those. The public perception is definitely, you are in, you're always in, you're forever going to be in the club. And so let's let everyone know what's kind of our goals moving forward. So, we've already talked that we want to have this discussion, right, about the positives of club life too. I think that's important, what kind of lessons we've learned from being in a club, how it's changed us as people, but also the takeaways of like, what are you going to do now and what can you do now? And so, Jason, you kind of let people know like what guests we have coming up and kind of what our goal is moving forward. Of course, our goal is to be an outreach for anyone who wants to talk to us. Our overall goal is to just keep talking to different members from different motorcycle clubs. We have a few guests lined up for this season that you're really going to like to hear some stories from, and also their same struggles as to how they readapted to their social life and got back with their family and put that back on track and put that number one. But yeah, our major objective here is to let everyone know that there is some people out there who care, and we feel like we can connect to everybody and create a bigger network and a better community by getting some of this stuff on the table. And I'm really hoping to bring attention to, current members and former members that regardless of what patch we wear, I'm really hoping to show how much we all have in common.
that guys like you and I joined motorcycle clubs for probably similar reasons. Guys like you and I enjoyed being in a motorcycle club for similar reasons. And I really want to show that like common thread of what brings people to this lifestyle and, kind of why we're here and who we are, because I really think you take that patch away, people are really going to understand how much we all have in common. And it's sad to see everyone fighting each other over it when we all actually have more in common than we don't have in common, So I think that's something else I'm hoping to bring attention to. Exactly.
Because I know for a fact that if you were to take off the helmet, to take the patch off, to all be in a bar without those insignias on, and you started talking to everybody, you'd be surprised how quickly you wanted to continue that conversation with somebody that you've never met before. And
Absolutely.
And it's just that simple.
So since leaving club life behind, what kind of stuff has been in store for you since, or what kind of accomplishments have you had since you left the club or put the club behind you?
Even during the club, but to give you something that I've also continued to do after the club, we started a nonprofit charity. We take special needs children, primarily Asperger's and autism. Kids surfing for water therapy. Been involved in that for 13 years. Myself and 4 other guys started it. It's another thing that's a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. There's no downside to it at all. My kids are a big part of my life, keeping up with everything that they got going. I just had a daughter graduate high school, so that's kind of a big deal. And also just getting involved with like community activities, and also opened a bar about 5 years ago, and it's still going even after COVID. So that's a whole nother avenue I went down. But I have no complaints these days. I'm very fortunate, blessed. Still go on a ride with a group of guys every September. And we look forward to that every year. I plan out a trip, and we plan out a destination. We get together, and as far as I'm concerned, anyone's welcome. We get along, and we love everybody, and we just are out to have a good time the way we think that it should be. So, what about yourself, Mooch?
Yeah, so like I said, I really liked seeing that, you can do all these positive things and no longer, without being in the club. And I had the really similar experience. Towards the end of my career in the club, I graduated with my master's degree in social work. So now I'm a mental health therapist. I work with teens that are on parole probation with the goal of keeping them out of prison, keep them reunited with the parents, and keep them in their home. So that's been really rewarding and fun. I got on a jiu-jitsu team, so I work out quite a bit. And I wrote a book about my experience in club life called The Ride of My Life. I have a podcast where I kind of discuss just my journey through life. It's called Mondays with Mooch. So I've been connecting with a lot of ex-members of other clubs there, connecting with other people there. And then I have a group called Lift Train Ride, where it's not really a motorcycle club. It's kind of just a lifestyle, but it's where like we were saying before, I replicate the things I enjoyed about motorcycle clubs. So we get together, make sure we ride once a week. Everyone's working out at least 3 days a week and training together, building those brotherhoods, barbecuing together, having family get-togethers and stuff like that. And then twice a year we do a big run, like a 3-day ride. So things have been really positive. I took a lot of the stuff that I learned from club life that I enjoyed, and I took it with me post-club life, but in a more positive manner. So it's been really cool.
I love that. That's great.
We've got a lot of other guests coming up. So, everyone stay tuned, check it out, and then definitely reach out to us. Jason, you can let people know our contact information so people can reach out with any questions they have or topics they'd like to see us discuss.
Feel free to reach out. We will definitely respond. We believe that it's very important to make these connections and to help whoever needs, even just someone to listen to. So please reach out, and we look forward to you guys following us as we go along this journey.
Well, I had a great time talking with you today, and really liked seeing what kind of shared experience we have and how similar things were for us in those lives and then after. So I really look forward to getting to know you more and starting to get to know more of these other guys that we have on.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Find us on Instagram at automoto.ent, at OG_Mooch, at Jason_Logan81. And for more info and episodes, go to automotoentertainment.com. Thanks for joining us on this first episode of Patched. There's much more to come. The Patched podcast series is brought to you by Oak and Iron, Craft Cocktail Bar in Thousand Oaks, California. By Outdoor Creations, serving the Southern California and Nashville areas.